Hello everyone, Revan619 here. I am back from my weekend away and now I'm going to start talking to you about Eogun. Now Eogun is a very complicated character to use. For the guides running up for the DLC 3 launch, I didn't really want to be showing any combat footage to avoid spoilers for new players. However, Eogun is going to demand that I do show you a little bit of how he works and explain his mechanic. Eogun has a very unique feature called Potential Energy. For every 1 AP spent, Eogun gains 1 stack of Potential Energy. These stacks are used to activate Eogun's unique abilities such as Galvanic Field. Most of these cost 0 AP, which means Eogun is an exceptionally strong buffer. Eogun can be built as either a Overseer using the Skull Pet, which is incredibly good for buffing, a Grand Strategist to go first to buff one person, or even a Masked Tactician if you plan to go down the damage route, because Eogun can do it all. For every stack of Potential Energy, Eogun also gains int bonus to his shock damage that's dealt. Eogun has some unique features based on his augments because he gains his armor through his logic skill. So as you can see, if we look at his abilities, he's not able to use armor slots, back slots, or cape slots, and he is going to instead be very reliant on his augmentics. The buffs Eogun use are incredibly powerful. There is one like Charge Distribution, where Eogun can give electrified strikes to himself or an ally within 9 cells 1 round, allowing the target to deal additional shock damage. What this does is it creates AoE damage shockwaves based on his intelligence. The more intelligence he has, the more damage he does. He has another one called Galvanic Field. Eogun grants a Galvanic Field to an ally within 9 cells. That ally becomes immune to Eogun's attacks, some of which will ricochet random enemies. So what this does is, attacks like Magna Rail Blast and his arc rifle or plasma weapons will actually bounce off allies and they will redirect towards enemies. However, this effect can sometimes ricochet to other allies if you're not using Overseer to put this party wide, and it will not work with stuff like the Charge Distribution's electrified strikes. The next talent, Eogun can do something called Defend the Divine Work, which can give the Blessing of the Omnissiah, which is an incredibly strong int bonus to allies, and it can also increase allies' damage based on their armor. Another one that he has access to is Galvanic Gate, the Mechandorite. For 1 round, Eogun creates an energy wall that occupies 8 cells in a straight line. Ranged attacks made by Eogun or his allies through this area deal an additional 14 shock damage and have more armor penetration. Unfortunately, this one isn't as crazy OP as the others. It doesn't seem to stack with all of the other modifiers. And the last one is Eogun is able to connect an additional weapon, either the Magna Rail Blast or the Transonic Cannon. This can deal additional damage, and it is also very effective at setting up things for arc rifle follow-ups. Eogun starts with very low perception and very low ballistic skill, so you do need to build up ballistic skill, but perception you can replace with intelligence with a new item, and Eogun has the potential to be one of the strongest buffers. There is a slight downside to everything. If you go Grand Strategist to go first, you can only buff 1 ally. If you go Overseer to buff the whole party, you need someone else to be a Grand Strategist to give him a turn, and if you go Master Tactician, well then you're being selfish and mostly going for damage, or you can just turbo buff 1 ally. It depends on how you want to play him. So I'm going to show you a little rotation so you can understand sort of what's going on with this, and then we can actually talk about an example build. On my spreadsheet, I already have Grand Strategist and Overseer up for people, and that will eventually come to public release, but for now, we're just going to talk about the Overseer. So for this combat, I'm going to set up my skulls in the middle of the party so we can buff everyone. As you can see, I've started off with 6 potential energy based on my build, and I'm going to stack that up even more. So you need to spend AP for this to increase the potential energy, and as you can see, the new mechanic is here. So when we put Air of Authority, notice it goes up to 7. When we add Take Aim, goes up to 8. So these buffs are all going to be applying to the party here, so we're going to be getting quite a lot out of them, and including his buffs for, say, his Charge Distribution, which we're going to apply to the party and himself. We're going to set up the Galvanic Field to the party and himself, and we're going to set up the Blessing of the Omnissiah. I could also set up the Attack Gate, but I don't want to really go into that too much just now. But if we look at the buffs that are now being applied to the party, we're seeing a lot of stacks of things coming through like Focus. Now, if I move Eogun away from the party, because some of the augments that I have on him will also cause some other things to happen, and I will set up this wall in front of him just to show off an example of some of the shots we can do. Now, with the Magna Rail Blast, we can set an area, and then it will arc off in 2 directions. So we can go arc off here, and we can try and arc towards these guys, but we won't get them. But as you can see, already the Magna Rail Blast has killed a few people and it has caused some ping-pong style abilities. Then if we want to follow up and shoot, because these guys are slightly out of our range, we may struggle to hit them, but the ricochet, if we do get them, will cause quite a bit of AoE. And as you can see, exceptionally big damage that will bounce between them. Now that AoE will actually do a lot more than the rest of what Eogun does, and because I've been able to buff allies, I can show you what happens to allies' attacks if they also get buffs. So they will also have these electrified strikes on their single target attacks. Ideally, this would be better if some of these enemies were closer, because then they would also take damage from those one cells around you. But these shockwaves will do a lot of damage for allies, and they're going to be exceptionally powerful because they'll get boosted by characters like Argenta, who will then be able to just pick off enemies across the map and do a lot with it. So yes, Argenta is going to be exceptionally powerful with it because of that. And because of some of her new buffs as well, she'll also be able to do some things in melee. But this is obviously not going to be a showcase about showing off what Argenta can do here. This is going to be more about us wanting to show off what we're getting. But as you can see, from the kick, the area damage that I just did on the Chimera there blew up his friend just behind him. Eogun starts with an officer, and you'll be happy to find out that I actually changed the base build that they wanted to go with it. Now, there are some things that I wasn't allowed to change, such as his level ups in tech use and his level ups into logic, and as well as his base skill for tech use, base skill for logic, and base skill for Medicae and Steel Resolve. All of the rest of the talents I got to change. So the Outcat spoke to me about it. I made suggestions, I made my arguments, they let me have it. So we get last impression first, so we get more out of our voice of command because half bonuses will apply for longer. We get our level ups in intelligence. Unfortunately, Eogun is an intelligence fellowship character, and he doesn't get to get a special skill like Be Smart or J scaling, so you do need to level both. But intelligence is not wasted because it interacts with all of his direct abilities from his Manipulus origin. Decisive Response is one that will reduce the cost of voice of command and bring it down for the first turn of combat, making him very good at setting up. Error of Authority will give extra resolve to allies, and it will also give them action points when they're under voice command, and if you're an overseer, you're applying that to the whole party. Steel Resolve increases his resolve. Now, if this was personal oversight, this would be a lot better because of his buffs, but we will take that in Exemplar levels. Finest Upgrade, I made sure he got 1 and 4, so we don't have the old J problems. We start increasing his ballistic skill because he does start with low ballistic skill in his base build. You'll only have 35 when you first recruit him. Inspiring Speech to help increase allies' resolve even more. Take Aim will improve the aim of all the characters, which is very good for higher difficulties. Lower difficulty players would probably prefer something like Move, so you could move allies up. Shoot your allies, which then enhances shots. Because one of the things for one of his features that we'll talk about in a little bit is when he shoots his allies and ricochets his shots, it actually enhances them. Focus, for each buff that he applies to allies, it will increase their ballistic skill and perception. This is why being able to buff Eogun first, it will actually be a bit of a bonus. So if you even go with the overclocking, the Commander's Chrono to go first to buff an ally officer and have them buff you, it will enhance your buffs. Calculated Relations was the last one that I managed to get on here because he uses his intelligence, persuasion, coercion, and commerce because it is going to be much higher. And lastly, he gets the Finest Hour upgrade 4. As I briefly mentioned, all single target range attacks made by Eogun targeting this creature ricochet to a random enemy nearby. The damage and critical hit chance for such attacks is increased by 42%, which is pretty nice. For the purpose of this guide, we're actually going to be starting with Overseer. Yes, Grand Strategist will be much easier to play, but I did the whole run on Unfair with just Eogun as my officer and no Grand Strategist, no Cassia. So we start with the Server Skull so we can apply AoE buffs to the party, which is going to be very good here. We then get Charge Distribution, so we can start buffing allies so their single target attacks will create shockwaves, which do exceptional damage. I've already posted shorts of seeing Abelard absolutely destroy Cinder at level 17 because of it. Symbiosis will be when we extrapolate an ability, we get 1 AP. So if you use that voice of command, you actually generate 1 AP in the first round. So if you start with a Bring It Down or something else, you'll actually increase your own AP. Start leveling intelligence because it's going to be very important. And then we're going to get the Galvanic Module ability first. So this thing is when Eogun grants the effect of Galvanic Field to an ally with that ally becomes immune to it. This will also apply it to your Servo Skull so you can bounce attacks off your Servo Skull to keep it safe from yourself. We'll start getting Defend the Divine Work, because this is going to be a very good buff for to get the Blessing of Omnissiah, as well as progressing his logic, because it increases armor based on his Augmentics, and we will go into that a little bit later. Machine God's Protection, like I said, will increase the critical hit chance of allies, as well as their damage based on their armor, so it's going to be very good. And the upgrade for it, for this one, will actually increase critical hit chance. The upgrade for Defend Divine Work is Machine God's Protection, which will further increase the critical hit chance that you have based on the Ferrum stacks. We'll get some Fellowship, and then we'll start taking Liturgy of Installation. If allies become the secondary targets with the Arc Rifle, they do not suffer damage. This is going to be very important, because you only ricochet the main attack, and these attacks coming back would actually kill your own allies, so you don't want to do that as the Overseer. We then get Conduction. When a creature is affected by Electrified Strikes, ends its turn, that creature is damaged by this effect again. So if the Electrified Strikes hit something and do the extra 100 damage or so and don't kill it, when you end your turn, it will then kill it. So it's very powerful to get this early. We then increase more Fellowship and Logic. We get Overcharge Upgrade too, so that way if we do use this one, which will be unlikely because we'll always be using Finest Hours, our heroic action, but we will get plus 30 to our key characteristics. Galvanic Reaction. When an enemy attacks an ally affected by Galvanic Field, that enemy suffers shock damage. This is going to be quite useful for increasing damage for enemies' attack. Residual Charge. Whenever this character hits a target with an arc rifle, they gain 1 residual charge stack. When reaching 10, we get another attack. So this is another way to get more attacks with Eogun, and because he has some abilities with this, it is very good to be attacking with him, especially one of his nuke augments. More Ballistic Skill, more Persuasion. We then take Strategic Adaptation, so if we get kills, we also refund attacks. Round rank 16 is when we're going to be wanting to take Reserve Optimization, which on the first turn increases our potential energy. There are some augments that just by moving with Eogun, you also get more potential energy, and we use that in the early game, which is why we don't need to take this talent very early. Overclocking module will increase the radius of our shots coming from our arc rifle, which is going to be very useful to hit more enemies. More Ballistic Skill, more Persuasion. Rite of Calibration is going to be useful for moving our pet, so it is free for the first use, so that way we don't have to waste AP on getting it in place. And then Staggering Jolt. Enemies hit by this character's arc rifle suffer Arc Shock, which comes off on some of our abilities like Transonic Cannon, but this will increase the shock damage that we do to enemies, which is going to be very useful for building things up. And then we're also going to take Overcharge Upgrade 1. One of the things I haven't talked about is the reason why I've gone for Persuasion instead of Tech Use is so we can also use Pascal. That way Pascal can level Tech Use and Lorzino, so you can use both boys together, because they are an exceptionally powerful duo when combined. Eogun is heavily tied into the new Augmentics mechanic. He now has Analytics System, which is increasing his crit chance based on his intelligence, which is the base one for his Forge World. But then he has stuff like his Galvanic Field, which also comes in and increases his logic based on his level, and the upgrade increases his tech use. His armor actually comes from his Galvanic module, and this will increase his armor by his logic, and it will also increase his tech use, and it will also give him additional effects on upgrades when you have additional stacks of potential energy. His Dexter insertion will change his arm to be a modified Magna Rail Lance, well, base Magna Rail Lance or the Transonic War Cannon. These will give you another attack which will help set you up and do additional damages, and these will have different effects based on which one you're using, as well as different attack types. I've preferred the Magna Rail Lance, but you will tend to switch them between how you like it. Like I said earlier, you will get the Grav Core, which will allow you to increase potential energy by moving, but it will reduce your MP, but you can use stuff like Move, Move, Move on him to set this up, as well as he can use Move, Move, Move to set up allies to ricochet attacks to enemies. One of the arm upgrades I like that you get very early on is the remote revitalizer, so he can use Medicate and stims on allies in range, and that, yes, you can now stim allies. He's also got his hallowed conduit, so his potential energy stacks will also increase based on this, and this will also give him 2 on the upgrade. You can use items to change his physical stats to his mental stats, so if you want to use his axe or a rock sword, then that you can. And he'll also have optical insertions, which is quite useful for a lot of other things that come. I've got the lone line of support Augur Array in here because this is one that I found quite useful. All the progression for all of his Augmentics is already on the sheet, as well as all of his gear progression. So if you want to see act by act progression, then that is available on the sheet if you want to join into the Discord in the description, and then you can follow up and ask any questions on that. But now we're going to move into his exemplars to start talking about the last few abilities that we get in here that helps our turbo buffer here with the rest of the party. But the last augment I want to talk about is his walking tactical nuke. So this electro integrated selling. What this does is for each stack of Ferrum Sanctum, which is the new stack and negative that you get from using Augmentics, the energy and shock damage dealt by Eogun is increased by an amount equal to the increased shock damage he would suffer himself by applying all these modifiers, which is 12 times 15% for him at the moment, so you can imagine that's a lot of extra damage. The negative is whenever Eogun deals shock damage or energy damage, he also deals 96 shock damage with a 50% arm penetration to all creatures within a 2-cell radius, so you need to get more than 2 cells away from allies, and then you can just start blasting things. This also has a galvanized version, so what galvanized does is a special power-up that you can do to it, so until the end of turn, creatures affected by this augment's negative effect also trigger the effect once dealing damage to creatures in 2 by near cell. So if you're just near enemies and you just start blasting, you can nuke the entire map. This is exceptionally powerful if you actually use a buffer on Eogun yourself, be it if he was a master tactician or if you brought a master tactician in the party to apply buffs to him, but this makes Eogun quite exceptional at all-round support. For the Overseer variant, Exemplar is going to be when we built up enough ballistic skill to actually start shooting, and we're going to be using intelligence instead of perception to reduce enemies' dodge. The most important one we get is Firebrand, which will give allies extra AP when we use our Bring It Down on them. I have not built for Eogun's ability to bring it down to allies, because giving enemies extra turns just seems wasteful, because my builds are better than the enemy build, so my allies will do more than their allies will. We also get to complete the build and get Personal Oversight, the one that I want instead of Steel Resolve. Whenever the officer targets an ally with an action or an ability or an attack, that ally's resolve is increased by 1 until the end of the officer's next turn. This effect stacks and is prolonged until the end of the officer's next turn each time it stacks. So what this does is it gives us a lot of resolve to allies, so that means we're going to be getting a lot more heroic, so this is very good. We also, because we're going to be starting to attack, take Kinetic Module whenever an extra turn is granted in a 4-cell radius around the Overseer Skullstorm. Until the end of combat, the Overseer gains 3 Fellowship and has their damage increased by 8%, and that stacks, and that 8% is going to be based on the Familiar's Imp bonus, so getting good modules onto that is quite useful. And module progression is also on the spreadsheet, so once the spreadsheet's updated for live, you'll have that. Early access for the work process spreadsheet is available to YouTube subscribers and members. And just take a little time, if you do find these videos helpful, do subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow me on Twitch. I will be live streaming how to do this, and I think the next part of the live stream will be finishing up Act 1 and then going into Act 2, so we will be picking up Eogun, so I'll be able to show off live, and I've got some shorts coming out showing off some of his little shenanigans. Next, we take Ballistic Skill and Echo Pulse. Echo Pulse is really good as well, because enemies hit by this character's arc rifle suffer the number of Echo Pulse stacks equal to 10% of damage dealt. These stacks last until the end of combat, and this is kind of like a dot that will do extra damage. So as you can see, I've built Eogun for arc rifles. He starts with a plasma rifle, so he can use the area attacks because he's got bad to hit. But yeah, no, getting all of his strikes off with his arc rifles is exceptionally powerful. I've actually just been bragging about it in the early access in the media channel for ages. So if you see other people doing arc rifle builds, it's because I was like, arc rifle, arc rifle, arc rifle. Anyway, rank 4, we take up the Galvanic Gate. So this is going to be the one that allows us, when allies to shoot through it, to get extra shock damage going on to their attacks. We get some logic, and then we do actually even take in Degraded Defense, because now that we're attacking, we do want to help allies build that to do extra damage, and that has had a 90% nerf, but it's still quite useful. We also get High Voltage. Allies that move through cells occupied by the energy will gain 7 MP once per round. Enemies that pass through the energy will suffer 7 damage. So this is also useful for Eogun, because he can move through the wall himself and get more stacks of potential energy. We get some more Ballistic Skill, and we also take Leader's Assault. So when we make an attack, because we have ways to make 3 very easily, we can get another 15 Fellowship, which is going to be useful for our buffs. I then pick up Medicate Signals, so if you in the late game need to get some buffs to allies, this can be quite useful, and it gives a little bit more to the Servo Skull. We do then get some intelligence, and I do pick up Unseen Support. So as we move away from the Servo Skull, we actually get increased Fellowship, because we're not going to want to stick near it, especially when we get that one augment that will cause us to explode. We then get Motive Force Overloads. After galvanizing an augment, the user gets 2 AP and 3 MP, which is very useful for his tactical nuke. More Persuasion, Eager Subordinate, so allies next turns get extra damage. He then gets some AP increases, and by now we should have the Commander's Chrono, so we can use Seize the Initiative, which will increase allies damage during their extra turns whilst they're under Voice of Command. We then finish increasing our persuasion, and then we get potential difference. After Eogun uses the Magnum Rail Lance, the next instance of shock energy damage he deals increases by 1. This is because I chose to stick with the Magnum Rail Lance and the arc rifle because, yeah, double lightning cannons because it looks cool to be more persuasion. Lost energy is enemies hit by Eogun suffer 15% more shock damage until the end of combat. It does not stack. Yeah, so this will be useful for his gun with the Magnum Rail Lance first, and then obviously blasting with the arc rifle, and because that ping pongs around, you'll get that off quite a lot. Fellowship, at rank 14, we've run out of ways to increase our logic and our persuasion, and because we're increasing persuasion for the Black Signet Ring of the Inquisition, which is one of the most OP items in the game, we start increasing our Law Xenos just so he has a little bit into it, but he won't really be covering those skills. I then get Eager for Battle, so the first time combat we get 2 action points, so we can do more with our AP, especially if we want to make more attacks in that first round. Steady is going to be a damage buff that's going to come to allies, which will increase for each cell that they fire, which is going to be quite useful at range, especially with Argenta's Blessed Bolt Casing, which becomes a sniper rifle. Brother in Arms to get some more resolve. This is a late game one. You don't need to take this early. It's a bit of a trap taking it early. Small Lord Xenos. Then we get No Respite. So whenever the officer's ability grants action points to an ally, that ally also gets +1 characteristic to it. Everything. This will help stack up with all those other buffs we're coming in. Residual Power, which is after galvanizing an augment, the user gains 5 times number of Ferrum Sanctum stacks base damage for 1 round. We then get Repair Mechandrite. So if we do need to get up healing, but at this point probably not going to be healing very much. Fellowship, and then I take tension, and finally finishing at the speed of thought. You could even try to fit in some more of the augmentic talents if you really wanted to. That could increase his resolve on kill and on crit, but I didn't really need it. I'm already getting turn 1 heroics, so extra resolve is doing nothing for him, but it is something you can build into, and that will complete sort of the talents of where we go, and sort of I've already shown the buff rotation for him. As for items, like I said, Eogun will greatly benefit from Medal of Alacrity in the late game, but once you're starting to go first, especially with the Commander's Chrono, the Black Signet Ring of the Inquisition is the best thing in the world for any sort of buffer, and he does have some quite high persuasion with it. I've given him Marksman's Braces just to increase his critical damage and his ballistic skill, because he does suffer from quite low ballistic skill unless he's also receiving buffs. I am using the arc rifles on him. You can either use this or the Alpha's arc rifle, or even the Necron Tech once you get that in the late game, but I'm currently in Act 4 on this build, so that's why I don't have access to that yet. And obviously the Monocular of the Ballistic Calculation, which is a new shop item, incredibly powerful for him. And items that you can use, you can also put stims on him so you can help give buffs to allies, and there is other augments that you can give him. There are a lot of really good ones, especially the teamwork feature, though he doesn't use it as well as Jay, and being able to give allies like range stims without using the cost. You can then just stack him up full of drugs and just have him range inject allies. So there is a lot of options and a lot of ways to use Eogun, and in my opinion he is probably one of the most enjoyable characters, and I do hope that everyone that was bad-mouthing Eogun when he was first announced is now going to apologize to this happy little crazy man, because his story is fantastic, his archetype is fantastic, and what he adds to the game is fantastic. I'm Revan, I'll see you around soon, and do pop along to a live stream if you want to see more of how to actually play this, because you're open to spoilers.